We're going to be rapid here because I want to get Conor Grant in quite soon. Spectators, first of all, through the gates. Dave, in England, Tier 2, if you're from a Tier 2 area, away you go. It's not been full take-up to capacity, but it seems to have worked well so far.
Yeah, and it's unlikely that it would have been, isn't it? Because I think if you look at some of those midweek meetings from Wednesday, I think that you would be looking at about 600 people that they'd got 12 months earlier. So you wouldn't expect the crowds to be full, the gates to be full. It's obviously a really welcome step, this. It's great to see people back. I was at Sandown yesterday. That's the first time I've been... Well, I went to Chelmsford City for Racing TV on Thursday, but I don't think there are crowds there. But at Sandown there were, and it was it really brought something back that we've missed so badly.
I thought that was rather a poignant moment. John Hales having to reach over a double rail just to get a pat of his own horse's nose, but I'm afraid that's just where we're at.
It is. Owners have had to be very patient. On-course bookmakers have had to be extremely patient as well, because they've not been able to earn a living since March. So it's been a desperate few months. This week has obviously been a very good week with hopefully the vaccine now is merely days away for the over 80s, etc. So yeah, it was a great thing that that crowds were back, and we hope that is a step. A step towards normality. They're back in football and back in other sports, and so I suppose now what we're waiting for is for the tier system to provide us with sort of wider access, isn't it?
It doesn't look as though in some areas the tier system is going to be used for quite some time, does it?
No, I think that's right, but it was good news. Great to see, great to see crowds back. That's just a racecourse without crowds. It lacks vibrancy, it lacks atmosphere, and we got a bit of that back.
OK, Spectators back on the course. BBC Sports Personality of the Year. There are just 6 final nominees this year. One of those is Holly Doyle. I feel like Holly Doyle has been a sort of regular fixture on this list for the last year. What added significance is there to her presence on that list, that particular list, which is always quite heavily scrutinised by people in horse racing who tend to bemoan the fact that horse racing doesn't get the rub of the green in that programme or indeed in that shortlist? Well,
BBC TV, it doesn't, does it? I think that goes without saying. Let's get the negatives out of the way first. That Sports Personality of the Year is not the programme that it was. Things started going wrong when it changed its name from Sports Review of the Year, I think.
You're in grave danger of being a little bit of an old fart here.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Holly Doyle. You say that she's been pretty much a fixture on and talking points and on this programme. Well, there's a very good reason for that, isn't there? That she keeps finding personal bests, and her career in 2020 keeps taking meaningful steps forward.
What I'm more interested in here is whether her presence on this shortlist is in any way evidence of an increased cut-through beyond the sports fans. Beyond the fans of this sport.
Right. My instinctive answer to that is no.
OK.
That it's... I think it's an indication of how much she's achieved in 2020. Like you say, we were looking at a person who until October hadn't won a Group 1 race, has now. She's now ridden at the Breeders' Cup. She's going to Hong Kong today and to ride there for the first time. Holly Doyle is the real deal.
OK, there wasn't a steward's inquiry at Chelmsford City the other night after a dead heat. You were there, Dave. Tell me about it.
Well, this was a case where there was a dead heat here. We're going to have a look at the 2 horses here.
So ident for them. They're the horse in the navy and maroon quarters, who is in the middle of the 3, and the horse on the inside, the star on the cap.
Yeah, it's Arridge, who's trained by Simon and Ed Crisford, and Hugo Palmer's
Power of States.
Power of States. Now, the point with this, and I made this point at the time, and it got, you know, mixed reaction on social media, inevitably. But the thing is, this was a 0 to 80, 0 to 85 handicap. It was I think it was the second best race on the card. It was the second best flat race of the day. And if we are constantly aware of racing's financially parlous position at the moment, health, aren't we, because of COVID-19, and we rely on punter confidence for our income. Now, I know that obviously there was a stewards report on the BHA website that said they'd looked at the interference, they didn't think that it merited further investigation, and I know also that at the back of their minds they want to keep recycling punters' money, so they want to keep stewards' inquiries to a minimum. But I thought this showed racing in a bad light. You could not separate them. It was a dead heat. There were 2 instances of cannoning. I made it 1.5-half. I thought that Arish was at fault for the first one. I thought the second was 50-50, and I just think that there should have been a steward's inquiry, and that they need to raise the bar slightly, or maybe lower the bar,
lower
if
the
you
threshold.
Like. Just lower the threshold, say, right, we must look into it, call in the jockeys. And so if we don't have punter confidence, we don't have anything.
Let's talk about Annamarie Phelps, who this week warned of the dangers of a ban on bookmaker advertising. Now, previously, it was considered that racing would be ring-fenced from any ban on bookmaker advertising, Dave, but we're not quite sure what's going to happen as regards the recommendations put forward by the Gambling Review, and that could happen as early as tomorrow. We'll be talking to Conor Grant about that in a few moments' time.
Yeah, and never build your house. Never build one's house on statements like that. We see that within the workings of government every day, don't we? That particularly with the current health crisis, that what's true today might not be true tomorrow. And so I think this was a timely intervention, if you like, by Annamarie Phelps, that all of us in horse racing, I hope, believe that responsibly managed, that betting is a positive and a legitimate form of entertainment for over 18s. And it's obviously incumbent on those within the sport, and particularly within the betting industry, to show publicly that they are managing that responsibly, and that this isn't just like, well, let's get as much money as we can, etc., etc. And so I think that this is a drum that racing and betting has to continue to beat, because if there were to be restrictions on gambling advertising with regard to horse racing, that is a massive problem for us.
Well, it would be a huge problem. I mean, there is a reason why there are so many days of horse racing on network television at the moment, either on the main terrestrial channel or its affiliates.
Yeah, absolutely, because bookmakers sponsor it. And speaking, you know, I work for a newspaper group who welcome bookmaker sponsorship, and it's a huge contributor to the health of the group. You know, you look at the figures that we get for Cheltenham and Aintree across the Mirror and the Star particularly, they're big figures. And so this, as I say, this is a timely intervention, and it's something that we have to pay very close attention to, because the consequences would be very serious.
Another sponsorship blow dealt to Cheltenham this week. Magners will end their sponsorship, or their partnership, with Cheltenham after the running of the 2021 Cheltenham Gold Cup. That was a 3-year deal, and they will not extend or renew. Given that Magners are in the hospitality trade, it's not really Cheltenham's fault. It's just a consequence of COVID. I think we can mark this down as a consequence of COVID, can't we, Dave, rather than a failing on the part of the sport to keep their sponsors?
Yes, I think we can. I mean, the difficulty for the difficulty in this instance throughout the wider world during COVID-19 is that you can't see the join, can you? We can't see the join between difficulties the industry that are non-COVID related, just pure greed on the part of the bosses who want to get rid of a few people because it makes them richer, and trading conditions that have been made worse by the COVID-19 crisis. In this instance, as you say, we can't see the joy, and we never can, but it's pretty clear that the hospitality sector has been hit more seriously and harder than pretty much anyone else, really. I suppose airlines would might argue with that, but it was a 3-year deal. It's not going to be renewed, and so in that respect, if we put it down to COVID-19 related difficulties, well, at least we've got maybe the solace that it's not, the problem isn't elsewhere, but financially it still leaves us with might there have been a circumstance where a sponsor would have thought, well, we have to keep that, we can't lose that because it's the Cheltenham Gold Cup? In this instance, that hasn't happened.
But we've lost our Derby sponsor, the long-standing sponsor Investec. The Gold Cup will be without a sponsor. They are two of racing's great prizes.
Yeah, they are. And I mean, I think only the most dedicated sort of head-in-the-sand merchant would not see the loss of those two sponsorships and think that it's a very worrying sign.
The Champion Hurdle is sponsored by a bookmaker. The Champion Chase is sponsored by a bookmaker.
Well, racing and Cheltenham sometimes have been a bit sniffy about bookmaker sponsorship in the past.
Yeah.
But, you know, their money's the same colour as everyone else's, and we know that they're in this sport for the long haul, don't we?
Ed Vaughan is starting a new career this week in Kentucky. He's hoping to have his first runners at Turfway Park toward the end of the year, whilst Nick Littmaden is relocating to France because their opportunities simply aren't financially viable enough here. This is quite simple, Dave. This is all about the economics of trying to be a racehorse trainer in the UK.
Yes, I don't think there's any question about that. That we can't really... we can't lay the blame anywhere else, can we? It's a great shame that Ed Vaughan and Nick Littmaden, two very successful and very good trainers of thoroughbreds, have decided that going elsewhere is the only really financially viable move for them. Obviously, going in different directions. You know, before I visiting Ed Vaughan's stable in Newmarket, which is a wonderful matchel place, a really wonderful Victorian, an example of a Victorian stable, a couple of years ago, and he said he was going to have the roof done, I think, of 3 parts of the 3 sides. And I thought, my goodness, how much must that cost? You know, the costs of running that yard, even with high-profile owners there, were absolutely astronomical, and it's just not possible to balance the books.
And clearly this will raise issues that we've been talking about all year, insofar as until racing gets what is perceived to be a fair return, and that fair return is reflected somewhat in prize money, which then trickles down to the sports practitioners, then more and more migration is likely to happen. Is that a fair contention or not?
No, I think it is a very fair one, yeah. I mean, that's... until that does happen, there are going to be more people leaving, aren't there? It's an uncomfortable truth, like losing racecourses, losing trainers. We love this sport, and we love the tracks and the people who are in it. But there are going to be more people. I hope not tracks, but possibly going out rather than coming in. Our
old friend Low Sun. Not a massive surprise that he appears on this list at this time of year. He always does, and there's not really an awful lot you can do about it. You can't really ban the sun, but there are always nuances.
Could not buy it.
Very good. There are always nuances to this. Pond fence was omitted yesterday at Sandown, which is a big part of their steeplechase course. Now, the situation at Aintree with the Many Clouds chase, I've been talking to Suleika Varma, the head of Racing Northwest for the Jockey Club this morning, and she said there was a specific reason why the fences were omitted from the Many Clouds yesterday. She said, if you remember back to the previous meeting, the Old Roan chase, she'd moved the time of that to stop this happening. So I said, well, why couldn't you move the time of the Many Clouds? Well, because she said quite rightly, we wanted it in the ITV terrestrial television window. And in order for it to be in the window, it had to be at that time, because if you want the 2 Grand National fence races in the terrestrial TV window, they have to be a certain amount of time apart, hence the Becher and the Sefton bookending where they appear on ITV, because they need the time to rebuild the Grand National course. So because they need the time to rebuild, that's where the Many Clouds has to sit between the two of them, and of course that is at the time when you're likeliest to be hit by the low sun. But until you can move the television window or do something else with those Grand National races, or not have one or whatever, then you're slightly caught where you're caught.
What can you do with the two Grand National races, though?
Well, there's a possibility that you might only have the one, but that's probably a discussion for another day. I mean,
But it would solve this issue, though, wouldn't it? Because the Grand Sefton is lost yesterday. To most, certainly terrestrial viewers, I'd say, when I was in the press room at Sandown yesterday, and I looked up to see the finish of the Grand Sefton. Now, I know people say, well, we don't care about you, but you're writing at that point that you've got your news lines. It's Nicky Henderson, it's Altior, it's Politologue, it's Vieux Lion Rouge, it's All Mankind. And that's a footnote. Why not make that the centrepiece of another day, the Grand Sefton?
That's certainly an interesting thought. And that was the reason why low sun badly affected the Many Clouds. Yes, it also, Suleika pointed out to me that there is now a function whereby a clerk of the course can press a button and tell everybody that this meeting is likely to be affected by low sun. But as she also pointed out, that's likely to be used more often than not, because you want to cover yourself against the eventuality of that happening. Right, those were this week's talking points. Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online. And don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.